13. The dangers of asbestos. Asbestos is a naturally occurring mineral fiber that was once widely used in many industrial and commercial products, including cement, brake pads, roof shingles, flooring products, and insulation. It wasn't until the late 1970s and 1980s that asbestos was recognized as a major health hazard. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, asbestos is a known carcinogen and prolonged or heavy exposure can cause cancer, including lung cancer and mesothelioma, a rare form of cancer that affects the protective lining of many internal organs. Asbestos can also cause many debilitating lung diseases, such as asbestosis, and other health issues. Asbestos is made of microscopic fibers that are flexible yet durable. When asbestos products age, degrade or get damaged, fibers can become airborne and easily inhaled or swallowed. Once inhaled, fiber accumulation in the lungs over many years greatly increases the risk of developing cancer, mesothelioma, and other lung and breathing issues. Symptoms of asbestos-related diseases often do not appear for 20 to 50 years after initial exposure. Tobacco smoking combined with asbestos exposure multiplies the lung cancer risk beyond either risk alone. There are three main types of asbestos that were commercially used: chrysotile, amosite and crocidolite. Chrysotile, or white asbestos, accounted for almost 90% of asbestos use in the United States. While chrysotile fiber is more easily able to break down in the lungs, all types of asbestos fibers are hazardous if inhaled, with crocidolite and amosite generally considered more dangerous. Animal studies and human epidemiological evidence clearly show asbestos causes mesothelioma, lung cancer, asbestosis and other diseases following both short and long-term exposure to any type of asbestos fiber. Asbestos was used extensively throughout the 20th century in over 3,000 construction and commercial products due to its sound absorption and resistance to fire, heat, electrical and chemical damage. It was used in ceiling and floor tiles, fireproof gloves, cloth, brake pads and linings, fire blankets, boiler, piping and other insulation. Navy ships during World War II and before were virtual floating clouds of asbestos. But asbestos is now banned or severely restricted for use in over 55 countries due to its deadly effects and the inability to safely use it without risk to human health. Some notable industries with high risks of asbestos exposure include shipbuilding, insulation, roofing, flooring, tiles, friction product manufacturing, clutch and brake pads, construction, automotive repair and railroads. Workers employed decades ago as insulators, brake repair workers, shipyard employees and others had disproportionately high rates of asbestos-related diseases and deaths. Asbestos mining and milling operations exposed entire rural communities to significant amounts of asbestos dust. Not only were workplace exposure risks very high, millions of Americans were exposed to asbestos in their homes or schools. Sprayed on asbestos insulation concealed inside walls or applied as fireproofing on structural beams and ceiling tiles put large populations at risk. Vermiculite attic insulation sold under the trade name Zonolite contained tremolite asbestos that contaminated millions of homes when it crumbled or became airborne. Studies have found that family members of asbestos workers, who inhaled second-hand asbestos dust brought home on work clothing, have a higher rate of mesothelioma. So even indirect and low-level environmental exposure can still increase health risks significantly over a lifetime. The risk of toxic exposure gets multiplied by activities like do-it-yourself home renovations or repairs where asbestos materials are sanded, sawed or drilled, allowing asbestos fibers to escape and float in the air people breathe. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, when asbestos-containing materials in good shape are not disturbed or allowed to crumble, they usually do not pose a health risk. However, material deterioration and damage over decades releases asbestos into home and school air and puts building occupants at unnecessary risk of exposure. Although banned for new uses in the U.S. since the late 1970s, Millions of tons of asbestos and asbestos-containing materials remain in place in aging buildings and infrastructure due to the enormous challenge and costs of identification and removal by properly trained professionals. Mesothelioma in particular has become a public health crisis, with over 3,000 deaths annually in the United States largely due to asbestos exposures decades ago. No safe level of asbestos exposure has been established, and the cancer risk extends for over 30 to 50 years following even brief or low-level exposures. While the risks of disease have gone down since asbestos use declined in the 1970s and workplace protections improved, thousands of Americans will continue dying each year for decades to come from historic asbestos exposures. Exposure to asbestos fibers, either through occupational contact or environmental exposure, poses serious health risks that can lead to disabling or fatal illnesses, including several forms of cancer. Proper training and safety precautions are needed for any work with asbestos materials to avoid releasing dangerous fibers into the air. New uses of asbestos are banned, but already existing asbestos in buildings needs to be properly maintained or removed by trained professionals to prevent exposures to occupants from aged materials that degrade over time. Preventing further exposure through awareness, cleaning and where needed, abatement remain vitally important to limit the human and economic burden of asbestos-caused disease. Awareness of asbestos risks, especially in older buildings, is crucial to avoid potential health consequences from hazardous fibers that can remain in the air and lungs for decades. Many thanks for